Is it a text or is it a button? Log in must be a button. Is this just kind of a headline for everything? When you come here, it says from Copenhagen to Johannesburg. Okay, so is that the only flight they have? This word doesn't say that I can actually click it. It doesn't signal. There's no signifier that tells me that I can actually click this word and change it. And if I have seen this many times before, I might just try and do it. But if I see this, these kinds of interfaces for the first time, it might not occur to me. So South African Airlines takes a while for it to load actually the interface. And then there's this. This says this neighborhood in Copenhagen was at the time. And this one tells you number letters as well. And then you can sign in. So I'm thinking, could I actually book a flight from Copenhagen to Johannesburg with these guys? How do I do that?
I went before
No. Well, you have to click the hamburger menu, and then you can see the bookings. And again, this is if you've never seen this symbol before, it doesn't tell you that it is where we hide everything, or that it's a menu. And even for the rest of us, it's kind of not intuitive. We think sort of. When I first saw this, I thought, oh no, I have to sign in to be able to book in.
Just like a question about learnability across the world.
Learnability, yeah.
Learnability.
Mm-hmm.
For some people that don't know that that's a burger menu.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how long do we wait? I mean, if we had to change, us as designers typically have to change that to a different icon.
Right.
All of a sudden.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
how long is it for people to actually get used to the idea that that is a burger menu?
Yeah.
Without saying a little menu label next to it.
Yeah, but you can learn, you can teach people anything, but is that our job? Isn't it to make a design that's so intuitive that you don't have to learn how to use it? So that's my point. I've had in some usability tests, I've had users first. We showed them some icons. So could they recognize that this is search and this is the menu and so on? And I had this guy who had actually worked on websites, and he immediately recognized, oh, that's the menu. Okay, but when we did actual testing with him, and had constructed a task where it would be easy to use the hamburger menu, and then one click and he was there. In an actual situation, he chose to just go back 6 steps, start at the home page, and then click somewhere down the hierarchy. Because it's not intuitive. It doesn't give you this scent of information. And again, it's an maybe I should show you the next slide so it's easier to explain. So this is Scandinavian Airlines. And this is a screenshot from my app. I am logged in. You can see how many points I have. That's right. I check about twice a day. Yeah. And when I've booked a flight on the website, I can check in here, and that's cool. And for months I thought, okay, that's what you can do. It took several months before it occurred to me that, hey, I can actually book flights on this one using this. And I know what that means. It just didn't occur to me.
It's actually supposed to be part of the flow that you're already in. Instead of signed in, it would have been book a flight or whatever.
Yeah.
Like part of the flow, and that's kind of your secondary or tertiary go-to for something that is not prominent on the actual script.
It's part of speaking the user's language and let the user focus on his or her task instead of having to focus on our interface. So yes, actually that's what's depressing, because designs actually get worse nowadays. So this is the old app, book a flight, book a hotel room, check in, find your booking, the bonus program, and flight status, and so on. Everything is visible. Not only is it not intuitive, because there's no center of information, it's not a task, but it's also an extra interaction cost. It's something more clicks I have to do. Yeah. Okay, so the last way of doing good is supporting accessibility in our designs. And in Europe, it will actually be a requirement for public sector websites and websites that receive, companies that receive government subsidies. We think, I've thought about on accessibility as something for blind people, and maybe that's now a target audience and so on. But actually, a lot of people have some disabilities and not good, maybe not good vision, or they are physically handicapped. And at some, just where you gave a great example where maybe you can tell like the mother.
So basically that at any point in our lives we would all have some sort of disability, whether we have shopping bags in our hands and we've got to just use one hand. So to make sure that whatever we're creating is easy enough for somebody to use in different situations.
Exactly, yeah. So kind of everybody knows what everybody knows about accessibility is every image must include an alt attribute, an alternative text replacement. But there are some if you go drill down in it, you will actually see some very interesting guidelines, like highlighting the current location that's in code as well as visually, and put keywords at the beginning of sentences. And now I'll show you a bad website from Denmark again. I hope they keep making bad websites for another 20 years or so. The moment they start making good websites, I'll be out of business. So, visit Copenhagen. So here are all these wonderful images, and you can actually see a lot in just one screen. So, if everything is perfect, it's quite a good page. But let's say the images don't load, or you can't see images. There's supposed to be an alternative text. For some of the images there aren't. For some of them it's like superficial, like frozen canals, ice skating. So it doesn't really tell you what's in the picture that you can't see. And I was actually surprised that putting keywords first in content was a guideline for accessibility, because I teach writing for the web classes, and you've probably heard about, seen the F pattern that people mostly scan to the left. But so people who use what is it called, assistive technology. Yeah, so the screen if they are blind, they have software that reads the content too. Then you often want to say, I'm looking for something specific, so I kind of try to read just since there are no subheads, I tend to hear just the first few words in each paragraph, and then skip to the next paragraph. No, it wasn't there. Next. But if you start every paragraph with words that don't actually mean anything, like originally, or some of them most, then it's not really helpful. Danish design, of course, is a are keywords, but the whole article is supposed to be about design. The interesting words are kind of buried. the 1950s, the biannual index award, and designers from the mid-century period. So that's kind of what might have been subheads, just the first few words in the paragraphs. And finally, the menu. So if I find that this article is actually very interesting, this is just the kind of content I'm looking for. Where am I in the hierarchy? Where can I find more of the same? It's not highlighted. And it should be, of course, for vision, but you can also highlight it for people who are blind. All right. So for each of these topics, health, sustainability, age-friendliness, accessibility, that there are sometimes hundreds of guidelines that you can dive into. These were just some examples. What we have to remember, though, is these are very specific for very, very specific audiences. We, in order to do actually UX for good, we also have to remember the basic human-centered design process. You know, some of you use the framework design thinking, which is great. It's focused on users, but I'll just remind you that there's actually an international standard for how to do these processes that are in some ways similar to design thinking, but I think this is an improvement actually. So this is just a visualization of the process. If you search for ISO 9241-10, it'll come up in many versions. So the first step is, of course, to understand users' needs, tasks, and limitations. And what we do is we do user interviews. So if we're designing a hospital website, we ask patients to tell us about how did you find out that you were sick, and what was the first step, and how did you get to the hospital, and what happened then? Did you go back for blood tests or other tests? And so on. So we get this big picture. And then what we do is do task analysis. So if you know user journey maps, or customer journey maps, task analysis, as I see this, is journey maps on steroids, because it's much more detailed. Journey maps are beautiful, but they're often, the ones I've seen are often very superficial, whereas in task analysis or hierarchical task analysis, you continue to decompose the task from the user's goal to get treated at hospital to the actual buttons they have to press and so on. So what that does is, if I get a user journey map and someone tells me, now you have to design an interface. Okay, so how do I come from there to the interface? Whereas if I have a task analysis diagram, it's pretty straightforward. So maybe you'd like to search for task analysis to see if that's something you can use. And another unique thing about human-centered design is that it's a part of the process to use guidelines to inform the design. So I think design thinking, there's a part of the process that is coming up with crazy ideas and being creative, which is great if you're innovating, but for most designs you are not actually innovating, you're just tweaking designs to make them more useful. And this is another standard, but there are thousands of usability guidelines out there that are free, some of them are in books, and it's kind of the accumulated knowledge of what we've seen in hundreds of usability tests So if we've already seen that sometimes some people miss a button if it doesn't have a shadow, why don't we just make the guidelines to say buttons have shadows? And then we produce design solutions to reach goals. Sometimes they're more detailed than these, but that's the third unique thing that I really like with this process. That before you decide how usable should the system be. Is average usability okay? So should 70% of all people, this is a complicated task, so it's okay if 70% of all people can complete the task. And if 50% can complete it in their first attempt. Or should it be 80% or 90%? And then, of course, if somebody tells me I have to design an interface that has to have 90% usability, and 90% of users have to be able to complete these 10 tasks, then I'll have to go back to my guidelines and say, okay, I think I can do that, but that means no scrolling, buttons will look really old-fashioned, links will be blue, underlined, no hamburgers, and stuff like that. If we're more tolerant that, okay, then I can allow scrolling pages and some not being as strict. But of course, even though we've followed every guideline there might still be usability problems, so we have to test it. And after many tests, you start to see the pattern, and that's kind of the thing that I encourage everybody to do, is to see the pattern. So a colleague and I took, I don't remember how many usability tests, but we had 299 usability problems that we started to categorize. And then we came up with these principles of web usability. You've probably heard of Jacob Nielsen's heuristics and some other heuristics. But they are actually based on software usability from the 90s. So websites and apps have more content, there's much more navigation, there's much more visual design, and we found it actually hard to categorize problems using their system. So we came up with our own. They're published in Danish right now, but they will be published in English hopefully soon. So, lastly, unfortunately, this concept of UX for good is not something I've come up with. I just started noticing that there are other interesting things we can do. But Don Norman started calling it 21st century design. And I think he has a point because, as I said, many books have come out on these topics and others. So after coining the term user experience and emotional design, he now wants to coin 21st century design. And his concept is that designers more and more will be working directly with products like health apps or apps that can help farmers be more productive to fight starvation and what have you. And that we should be focused as designers on addressing the serious societal issues in the world. What I like about the examples I've given and the resources I've seen, that actually we don't have to, even if you don't work on health, work with health apps or things that directly help sustainability, you just by doing your job at a bank or a software company, insurance company, what have you, you actually can support these concepts of health and sustainability, be accessible to everybody, support globalization. And I just think that's a cool perspective, and there are a lot of guidelines that are just available for us. Yeah, so that was it. In the coming weeks, I'll actually be publishing posts on LinkedIn on these matters, and you're very welcome to follow my company and follow me. I actually try to post a little thing on UX almost every day. Right now I post a series with UX quotes on each day, but there'll be a series on UX for good as well. So that's it. Thank you for listening.